Three,
Two,
one.
monkey bars. Already.
Clack, you're ready.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Thicc Butter podcast. My name is Alex.
My name is Jesse.
AKA Thicc.
AKA, what? Wait, yes.
AKA
Butter. Butter.
Damn, we had such a good flow. We had such a good freestyle
I just
flow
panicked.
going.
It was too fast, and I doubted my
Now
tongue twisting
now you
abilities.
realize how hard freestyling is.
Dude, if I was put in a position where it's like, Jesse, freestyle or die, I would panic and turn
We
into a
did
puddle
that.
of
We
water.
definitely done that in college for sure. We
Yeah, but
definitely-
like
we
being
gotten
in a
stoned.
booth and being super stoned with
Oh,
friends
yeah.
is
Oh,
different
yeah.
than like having a whole horde of like people who may or may not be good at rapping, being like
I love
freestyle, be
I love
cool.
watching like freestyle videos, like people who really know how to do it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm
really
always
impressive.
worried whenever the only freestyling videos I come across, which I don't like these, there's like the ones that are like the I should look at like real rappers freestyling. I've never done that. I don't know why, but
Yeah, you should do
but
that.
like I've always seen like reality TV shows of like people competing on a show freestyling, and those are
I mean,
horrible.
those could be really cool. Like, I mean, that's how like Eminem got to start and
Oh,
stuff
really?
like that. Like, yeah, like rap battling.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah,
awesome.
like on a TV show or something. No, it's not.
No,
It's
not
not.
even TV show. It's like not even televised. It's like underground hip hop.
Yeah, that's
Like,
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
super
yeah.
cool. That's super cool.
But yeah,
Um,
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Wild and Out or whatever that show is. Well,
yeah, that one. Those aren't too good.
anyway, we're not here to talk about freestyling. We don't have a movie in mind today. There's no movies coming out in theaters. When this comes out, it's gonna be probably middle of February. There's just nothing. There's Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but that isn't pressing matters. Jackass Forever, which I saw last night, very fun, funny, but not. Um, you know, the review could come down to this made me laugh.
How much more do you need?
That's really it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, we're just gonna do kind of a discussion podcast and little behind the scenes to the people that are listening. We have a Google Doc where you and I, if we have an idea for a podcast or a movie or something, that we just put it in there. So we've accumulated a lot of these questions, a lot of these discussion topics. And one of them caught our eye, which is just the question, what is a classic? What is a classic film? What is the meaning of all of this?
What is the
What
meaning
are
of this?
What are these lists of classic movies? What the hell does this mean? What the fuck? What is Citizen Kane? What is Rashomon? What are these things? These are old.
All in black and white, gritty, gross,
Why would I
yucky films.
watch an old black and white thing? that
There's
was
not even a
shot-
superhero on these
Not
movies.
even a movie. So, yeah, we just kind of want to. That's just the question: is
What
is
is
a
a classic?
And we went and did our own personal research, meeting, like half a day,
Yeah.
just googling, maybe a couple hours, and
Several
so.
Google searches later, we're here.
I think we formed some opinions on just the word classic and what classic films mean, and just the whole, also the culture behind uh, people calling films classics and things like that,
Yeah.
and what that really means, um, or what, I don't know, what people maybe don't realize what they're saying when they when they say that.
Right.
And yeah, I think we should just open. So I'm gonna ask you, Jesse, what is A classic?
Gee, golly, Alex, I'm
What
really
is
glad you asked me that
the
question.
Webster the definition of a classic? Let's start
Well,
there.
that's actually a perfect introduction to this because there's classic is a very malleable word which
Yeah.
has more of a colloquial sense and then like a film history sense and
Or just
more
like in the sense of like related to art, not
right,
just film. But
right.
yeah,
And then so the most technical definition that I found on my very studious Google searches
yeah.
um, in relation to films is a classic is a film that's at least 25 years old that's made an
Mm.
impact on culture and or the cinematic zeitgeist.
Where's that
um
from?
that was just like the top result. I'm not even sure what website
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
from,
yeah.
just the top results when I searched what is a
Yeah.
classic. And
That's interesting.
there's a lot of weird things. The depth the big thing I didn't think about was the need for it to be 25 years
Right.
old at
That's the
least.
one thing that I thought a little. That's why I asked you where that comes from. 'Cause that's a little
Yeah.
odd.
And I think it's good to
That
note
is a good years, I guess.
because
Good.
one of the things that I think is easiest to what we were pitching at the beginning, that the easiest way to figure out what is a classic is the films that we have remembered through time. So if
Yes.
a movie is still significant 25 years later, it's like, okay, maybe that's a classic.
Yeah.
But there are movies that are, I wish I could think of an example of a really god awful movie that was made 25 years ago
Mm-hmm.
that we still like, The Room or something,
The
right?
room. Yeah.
The Room. It's a classic
20 years.
horrible film. It is
Right.
kind of a classic, but it's not really
Yes.
the classic that this definition is
Well,
talking about.
okay. Okay. That's okay. Well, that's a good start. So the thing that I found when you just type in like classic, like just the word,
Mm-hmm.
not relation to film or anything, just literal the actual word is a classic is judged over a period of time to be the highest quality and outstanding of its kind.
Right.
Um, and I think that's like the simplest version of that. And the thing is, like, when you bring up the room, I think like for me, the classic word is so bizarre to me because there are so many different, like, you could use the word like modern classic or a cult classic, which would fall into the room, which are these movies that have been, talked about not even talking about quality, just movies that have been talked about, viewed for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And but they operate in not the mainstream audience, this big, loud, this huge film world. It's a cult. It's these select few people who a big, a big community that people that watch cult films, but it's a classic within that group. Um, and I just thought, I mean, these albums back here, this is actually kind of funny, but these albums kind of like to me are all classics in their own right.
Yeah.
But like for example, like no one like if you went up to the street and someone said like you said, Daft Punk's Discovery, with one more time and shit, they'll be like, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
Or Radiohead, okay, computer, that's a bona fide classic in the rock sphere. Then you have Liability, which is totally a classic in the underground hip hop scene. The people who listen to kind of honor hip hop, like, that go outside of the mainstream a little bit. Liability is the cream of the crop. It is like it's just when you first start getting into like MFD and Madlib and JPEG Mafia and Brockhampton and all shit, I mean, Denzel Curry, Liability is an album that most people who are fans of those guys love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Stankonia is Outkast's hip hop classic, period. Like just in the grand scheme of things. Um, and so what's interesting is that there's so many different, categories and ways that you can look at it.
Yeah.
And like just the definition of it's just a piece of art that has sustained relevance for over a period of time. And I think what's really important for people to know too, and for me to know, like especially when I first started watching movies, and this is just my opinion developing after I watched many things. It's like classic doesn't mean that it's great or that you will love it. That's not what it means. Like what it means is that because there are classic movies that like for example, like the majority of people, especially our friend group, this is a classic screwball comedy called uh Bringing Up Baby. The
Yeah.
majority of our friends will hate that movie. I mean, hate it. I mean, they will be like, "This is the most boring piece of shit ever made," and I fully believe that. Um, and but the thing is that it's the influence that that film had over the course of years and basically inventing that type of romantic comedy that we still see to this day. That's why it's a classic. It's the influence. But what meaning like times change. Like Bringing Up Baby was like the funniest movie ever in 1942, but it's
Yeah.
most definitely not the funniest thing in 2022 because people change. You're not gonna like these classic films that were made. You might not, or you might fucking love it. But I think it's important for people to know that just because it's deemed a classic doesn't mean that like this is the greatest thing.
Right, right. It's a really good
It's gonna blow my mind when I see it.
it's a really good point because it's totally true, and it's also true that this collection of classics, like these lists of
Mm-hmm.
classics, are generally considered to be the cream of the crop, the best
Yeah.
of quality in terms of that. But you can't necessarily just say that is the main reason, that there's a guarantee that they're going to be really good. And I think
Mm-hmm.
another
For
factor
you.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
on individual level,
Yeah.
it is fair to say that if you just watch, like if you go down the list of classics of any album, there's going to be hit or miss, but more than likely
Oh,
you're going to find a bunch of movies you'll
absolutely.
love, because much more than if you just went on a list of watching like all the movies, like like if you started watching all the movies ever made in a list, there's going to
Mm-hmm.
be way more you're
All
going to
of them.
dislike all of them ever made. But if you just start watching all the classics, you're gonna like, there's gonna be a high ratio,
Yeah.
I would say, of
Totally.
this film was great.
Yes.
Like this film changed my life.
Yes. You're
I think
definitely
that's
gonna.
true.
Yes.
But there's going to be a
100%.
lot of them you're not going to like, and a lot of them are
Yeah.
going to have aged past, relevance for
Totally.
you or your interest.
Yeah.
And I think another, since it's not really easy to just like describe a classic as being something that is just really good, or something that has
Mm-hmm.
it is, I think it's best to say something that has stayed relevant to the time. I think that's the most
Yeah.
general best thing. But the other thing that's significant is talking that classics films are usually films that have made an impact in how films are made.
Totally. Yeah.
There's some kind of cultural shift in how we think about how movies are made,
Mm-hmm.
or what films excuse me, what films could do, or what
Yeah.
we thought they couldn't do, and then like change that. Like The Godfather was a really
Yeah.
groundbreaking thing where like gangster movies, no one thought gangster movies could be a big popular thing.
And not even
And
that, but also with the Godfather, it was made in 73, 72, and it's
mhm,
very violent.
yeah,
Gangster movies were made, but they were not nearly as violent as the Godfather was. But also the Godfather took, if I remember correctly, some gangster films in like the 50s and stuff were kind of they were kind of viewed as like not high art. They were viewed as like kind of schlock, I think,
yeah,
back in the day. But The Godfather kind of made it like high art, high cinematic art, just because
right,
it's made by Francis Ford Coppola, and the way that he took that movie was very different, than any that movie like that made up until that point. And it
yeah.
spawned God knows how
Right.
many
It's had
clones,
a massive kinds of influence on the culture,
Yeah,
where it has inspired people to make movies just like The
right,
Godfather.
right.
There's whole or with Mad Villainy is another good example of that. Like the genres of music that you could link directly to Mad
Yeah.
Villainy is huge.
Yeah.
It's massive.
Yeah,
Was
it's pretty much almost all abstract hip hop that you listen to now, like has an element of that record because it's just so it just hits people so hard when it came out. You know, people that were listening to that music, it just influenced so much. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's weird because that list of movies, especially if you go back, like I was looking through a bunch of lists,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a bunch of old movies on there. Like I recognize stuff I watched in film school and
Right.
all Vertigo films, but there's a lot of them that are just like, I don't know what the hell this is. I've never
Of
seen this
course.
before. I've never
Yeah.
even heard
Yeah.
about
Yeah. Of
this.
course.
And there's so many movies like that that are just sort of been cataloged because they're
Yeah.
significant in film history, but
Right.
they're not, you don't really feel their relevance now, even though their
Yeah.
influence is still there. You know, Gone with the Wind or Sound of Music,
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz. You know, Wizard of Oz is a
Right.
little bit more like popular, known in the
Right.
popular
Oh, that
culture.
is a. I mean, that might be the classic of classics.
Right, the most
Wizard of Oz.
classic of classic. Yeah,
Yeah.
the progenitor
Yeah.
classic.
Yes.
But
Um.
yeah, we just have this list to sort of just keep track of these movies, these
Totally.
historical classics, if you will.
And I think with that, like that's, I think, yeah, all that is all fucking spot on. But I think I also want to talk about how something that's always interested me is like, why are we so obsessed with classics?
Right.
And like, because in this culture of, you know, me being a music fan and a film fan and, uh, you know, is on social media and follows, you know, stuff like movie releases, stuff like that. Classic gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
And meaning like when, you know, someone like you know, a technical R drops down, you know, the week it comes out, people are all already calling it a classic, you know, and that's just it's stupid, it's insane, like that, like that's it's dumb, but the emotion there is I totally understand it. It's listening to something that means a lot to you, you know, at the time. Um, you want it to become a classic, you know, like because you want, you know, you think that this film or this album that you just listened to has real artistic value, and you want it to live on past this year. And I understand the immediate uh feeling that you want to like this thing that you love, you want it to become a classic, but in reality, that doesn't fucking matter at all. If it doesn't become a classic, who the fuck cares? Like you still
Yeah.
enjoy it. It's a classic to you. You know, it's something that inspired you personally, or not just inspiring. You don't have to be an artist, obviously, but like it moved you. It's an album that you listen to when you're down. It's an album that you listen to when you work out. You know, whatever. Like that's you, man. Like it doesn't just because it's not like known to the public as this great thing that you think it is doesn't mean it's invaluable, you know.
Right.
Um, and it's fascinating that we have this obsession with. I mean, even like I like talking about this, like movies that we see, like you know, that come out every year. Like we like talking about like is this going to become a classic? Like, do we like?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fun conversation to have. I'm not saying that like that conversation is dumb. Like it's an interesting conversation, but just to be like, this is a classic. Period. It's
Yeah.
like, no, that's not how this works, man. Like, you know, it's
Right. It's an
over
interesting
time. You
it's a
know,
really interesting thing because I feel like what the inclination is, which I feel this often, you know, when I have a passionate experience about something, I want the satisfaction of trying to have confirmation that the thing I like is a
uh huh,
classic, is that my feelings for it is more than just like hedonistic, like I had a good time. It's
yeah.
that I was a part of something that changed the world kind
Yeah,
of
right. And
feeling.
then and that's like a communal thing. That's something that you
Right.
know that everybody loves. The sense of community, and it's like the sense. That's why like fandoms are so. That's why Marvel films. If you really bring it down, that's why Marvel films are so popular. It's why Star Wars is so popular. Which you know, I would definitely categorize myself as part of the Star Wars fandom. You know, and like it's amazing. Like spoiler, not to spoil it, but the last two episodes of Boba Fett, you know, the book of Boba Fett, were fucking unbelievably awesome. and it was so great to go on TikTok or go on social media and see the fans, responding to like the
Yeah.
way that I did, and with me and my buddy watching it here, and the communal aspect of something like that is amazing. And like, yeah, like you want that, right? Like you're so right. Like the idea that you listen to a fucking, to pick a butterfly, and you want everybody to, love it, and want everybody to, you want people in your inner circle to like it as much as you do.
Right, right. So this is, oh my gosh, I'm thinking of so many like variants of this situation too now. I don't know where to start. I think the place I want to start is talking about I was thinking about TPAB, To Pimp a
Mm-hmm.
Butterfly, because that and damn,
Classic.
those are yeah. TPAB is obviously that's an early one,
100%.
that's
Yeah.
recent, but that one's like is no doubt in anyone's
A
mind that
modern classic.
that's a modern classic.
Yes.
Because it was so, and we knew that pretty fast
Yeah.
because it was just so damn significant
Right.
about what that did and
Yeah.
what was
And
possible.
you see it now, and you're seeing the effects that album had, where it it I will stand that the sound palette of that record isn't the most like mind blowing thing. It's just bringing back jazz rap, it's bringing back like funk and stuff
Yeah,
like that were popular in the '70s. But you hear that music now. You hear, especially in hip hop music, like Kendrick kind of brought that sound back.
yeah,
And it's still, almost 10 years that album came out,
it's
and
crazy.
you still hear, one of my favorite hip hop albums in last year is called Little Sims. Um, sometimes I feel like an introvert. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, that's right, I
But
think.
that record had total P-Town vibes. It had
Mhm.
total, and she even references it on a song. And yeah, I mean the instrumentals on that record are clearly inspired by you know that sound, and like that just shows the influence.
Yeah.
Um,
And so let's take the influence, the phenomenon of TPAB, which was like this unanimous uproar of
mhm. But
appraisal
there's even
for it.
people who don't like that album, out there too.
Right, right. And but there are enough of the minority to make it
Enough.
like there
Yeah.
are enough of the minority to
Yeah.
make it them not be significant to
Yeah. Right.
deter it from being a classic. But then let's
Right.
take something like Endgame, right?
Yeah.
Endgame or Infinity War, which
Right.
I would not call those movies classics. I would not
Well,
call those
which is
movies.
another interesting thing is that in terms of blockbuster filmmaking, I mean, it's hard for me to call I mean, we're only 3 years out from it.
Right.
I mean, I'm leaning towards that it will become like a classic in the sense of like the event and the spectacle and something. It's the culmination of this almost, this like 10+ year cinematic universe that Marvel created, which is unheard of and
Yeah.
never have been seen in cinema. So it's maybe not a classic in terms of like, the artistic value that, but definitely in like blockbuster film realm, like it's definitely a classic in that sense. But I know what you're
Yeah.
saying. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not
I
gonna
was
be
the
not up there with
distinguishing
fucking, you know, Lawrence of
the
Arabia.
right. I think the distinguishing factor of why I wouldn't call it a classic is that I would say more of that significance. It had the significance of
It's more about the
audience.
culture and more about the
Yeah.
rather than the actual film
I
itself.
think my prediction of how as time will go by is I think that will land more in a place like Avatar does, where it will be a historical
Sure.
statistic that's
Yeah.
significant, more
Sure.
so than a classic. Because
Sure.
let's take another superhero movie, Raimi Spider-Man 1 and 2.
Right.
Those are more classic-y
Those are
feely to
class.
me.
I think those are class. I
Those are
think
classics.
those are we would fall pretty closely that people would call those classic
Yeah,
films.
even like I think most superhero fans, even if
Yes.
they don't like those films, they would call
Right.
those classic
Yes.
superhero films. And it's
Right.
not, and maybe once it'll be really interesting to see with Marvel to look at like which of these films are we
Yeah.
going to look at this whole event as a
Right.
classic event? Is it
And
going to be a
we
couple of
and we've
movies?
talked about that before with Marvel films that there's definitely gonna be a handful in that first phase before Endgame and ending with Endgame that are definitely, I mean, in some people's heads, like the first Iron Man is definitely like for some people like a classic movie, that they
Right.
grew up on and that they I did, I was like 10 when that movie came out, and like I remember seeing it in theaters and I think that film, I think the first one, I wouldn't be so firm to call it that, but I think, as our generation who basically grew up with that movie, and have so many fond memories, as we get older, I think we're gonna, you know, pick that one out, for example. But
Yeah.
then we got the sequels, maybe stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um,
It would also be, I just realized this, maybe this isn't relevant to this conversation, but the next generation will also be a significant contributor because they'll be they what if which ones they'll go back and be interested
exactly,
in
right.
will be a good indicator of saying
That's
it's like,
like
oh,
I can't
what's
wait until
inspiring.
we have kids and we're like 50 and like our teenage kids are like, you know, like they see something like,
Mad
like
Max is old and
Mad Max
stupid.
or no, or they see Mad Max Fury Road and they're like, that was fucking
Yeah.
awesome,
My kid better like Mad Max or I'm gonna
Oh,
kick
he
him
better.
out.
I'm gonna be selling that movie when he or she comes out of the womb.
Yeah.
So
Mad
here's Mad
Max.
Max Fury Road. Um,
That's another kind of modern
I would
classic
say
too.
so. I would more put that in the cult
I
classic
think that's
right
fair.
now.
Oh, do you want to
Um,
let's actually go down that avenue real quick. Let's
yeah,
talk about the distinction of cult classic because that's
yeah. I mean,
also
yeah, totally.
that's because the difference between that is that usually when we talk about classics, they're a thing that make an impact similar to Endgame,
Hmm.
but where they have an impact that's really huge on the outset and has this influence. Jaws, Steven
Right,
Spielberg films, all
right.
that type of stuff, and then it
Classic.
has a lasting impact
Yeah.
after that huge moment.
Yes.
But a
Totally.
cult classic
Yeah.
is something that is a similar status in terms of
Uh-huh.
quality and respect, but doesn't have that
Right.
big explosion when it first comes out.
And this is yes, and this is like something that is fascinates me. And like I wish that I had a friend or knew somebody that was more because cult films, that's a whole community. There's a
Mm-hmm.
whole set of people that love to watch like the horror movies and stuff like that, like little cult movies. I would definitely say that I'm a fan. I like those movies a lot. I'm just not that well versed in that culture as I'd like to be,
Yeah.
Um, but what's interesting is you think about, um, I mean, we definitely talk about Criterion, I think, and
Oh my gosh,
but
that's a
but
great point.
but more to Criterion, there's this company called Shout Factory and Arrow Video that literally that's their specialty is that
Yeah.
they re-release and find these cult films and they got cult classics as well, but definitely cult films. And they put them on Blu-ray and they give them this treatment of like luxury, treatment,
Yeah.
and that to me has always been so fascinating. And that there's obviously a large audience for it, like the fact that there's a very successful company, Arrow Video, who has been going for years, who specializes in making movies that people don't know what the fuck they are. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really impressive. I mean, you can order a movie called, that I really want to see, but called Microwave Massacre, and get a like restored version and a really amazing Blu-ray quality of this most likely, you know, fun, shitty B horror movie,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that to me is like fascinating because it's just like cult movies operate on a different level than your normal film because cult, meaning a following, a small following of people.
Yeah.
Um, and something like The Room that is definitely a cult, probably the cult movie I would say, probably like one of the biggest ones of all time. But it's still like niche, and it's so beloved in this you know this small group of people that it's 100% a classic. Like for people that who follow movies like that, dude, that is a classic
Yeah.
through and through. Um, and like movies like, you know, one of my favorite The Incredible movies, Videodrome.
Oh, so
Um,
cool. I love that movie.
but what's interesting about Videodrome, and what we can talk about too, like, is that film is definitely a cult classic, 100% without no doubt. It's but when it came out, it was people. You know, if you read reviews of Videodrome, Roger Ebert famously called it disgusting, horrible. You know, it was that film was so. Rewatched it the other day, and I reviewed it on Letterboxd, and I wrote like, was he a time traveler? Because this movie it's so ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Like not just like the maybe the visual effects and stuff like that, because it was early '80s. It wasn't like deep into the '80s, like when we started getting like really crazy special effects. It was just the subject matter of that film
Yeah.
is so eerie how much more relevant than it is today, and like just the commentary on just like the blurring of realities and with TV and with you can look at whole movie and replace the the reality the channel as like a YouTube channel or a
Right.
social
Right.
media. Like it's really eerie how relevant that movie still is. And that's most likely the reason that it became this cult classic is because it was ahead of its time. The film was just
Yeah.
so great that when it initially came out, people just didn't. I don't even know. There's part of me that Cronenberg didn't even really know. I mean, honestly, like when you watch that,
I don't think you
you
did. He
think
did.
like he was just making this cool, you know, like the movies that he was making at the time, which great filmmaker. Like The Brood is an amazing film, but what he was making was like kind of standards from. Also, it was like these cool high concept like body horror movies. And it seemed like that Videodrome was just another one of those. But it turned out to be so much greater than that, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because the more conventional classic, I guess, do have this staple of needing to be innovative. It pushes things.
Yeah,
But then these
right.
cult classics like Videodrome or The Thing is the other big example
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of,
Yeah,
are films that are like too ahead and people are like,
right.
I don't get this.
And
This fucking
those and
sucks.
like those like what's interesting too is like even talking about that is like there are films that come out like now that we might not even know, you know what I mean? Like
Like The
that come
Lighthouse
out.
is an example of that for me or
Right, and I mean,
something.
I think, well, even things that we might not even have seen or not even like, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's like that's what's interesting is that we're not empaths, we're not like, we can't see the future, Like, I don't know, like, a film that I don't know, I don't know, we don't know, like, some films that they not hit us the way that it might just become like super relevant, in 20 years,
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I wonder, I would love to go back and look at like the time scale of how, like, did The Thing or Videodrome, did they fail in the box office and then disappear for a while and then come back? Or did they
right.
disappear and go straight to a fan base, like a cult fan base,
You
and sort
know,
of regenerate
I
from
don't
that?
know. And one of the things that reminds me of that uh it's the invention of home video. And I think that is I think that that's really the reason why Videodrome. I mean, if we were still in the age of like you couldn't like you had to see it in the theater, for example, the Videodrome would be gone. People that like it would be like people that are older that had saw it were like would talk about it. It'd be like myth, it'd be like
Hmm.
I saw
Hmm.
this weird movie one time where like James Woods took his head into a TV and had like sex with the TV and it's like this weird pseudo sexual like it's but now with like home video
With
and
the internet.
it, things like Criterion, I mean Criterion like what they specialize in is something that I think people are taking for granted. I'm telling you, like years from now, people are gonna. I mean, people love Criterion today. pretty niche, but I think as years go by, I think people are going to have so much respect for them, and they already do, but they're bringing these films that were so called lost. You know, maybe these art films and maybe these films that had this like impact for the time that were in the film sphere that were so great, but they faded into obscurity for obvious reasons. No one saw them. Why would the studio put money into, you know, re-releasing this thing? Like a lot of these films that come out, they just go in a vault and they're like
Yeah,
the
they just
reels
sit
and
there.
shit.
Yeah,
And Criterion's so amazing because they like recognize these works of cinematic art and they bring it and they put it on digital and allow them to live forever. And
yeah.
that's something that really what they do. They also, are a brand that sells their content, but what they're really doing is archiving films.
Right, right.
Um
That's a really significant thing of
and they
to
operate more on the cult, like cult also classics. They have a lot of classics in the Criterion collection, but a lot of also smaller cult movies as well.
right, right. And it's valuable to, I mean, honestly, to a degree, it's valuable if we could keep every single film that's made. There's some kind of value to doing that. You know, there's a lot of films
One
that
hundred
I
percent.
hate, but there's something, it's something about the whole context that's really important.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're safe from that in the modern age either, you know, because a lot
No,
of films that are irrelevant.
we are more dangerous today
Yeah.
because of like things like streaming where these large corporations have, Disney buying Fox was a big like scary thing for a lot of film fans because Fox is, a company that's been around for, decades, one of the first major studios. And there are
Yeah.
so many classic films and in their back catalog that might easily just disappear because someone like Disney, why would we put this on our streaming service? Like what? No one's gonna watch this.
Yeah.
It's just gonna carry up space. And that's scary. Like the idea that something like, I mean, this won't because it's made out of Coen Brothers, but the idea of like a Raising Arizona, for example, which is like one of my favorite comedies ever made, it was a Fox film, and imagine that like just disappearing. Like this is the thing about physical
Right.
media that
Right.
like I think is great is that like the internet is, it's out there, but it's just like it can easily so be taken off by a second. Like with a like one guy on his desk can literally just delete a movie off of a streaming service, and you could find it, but it would be a bit more difficult. I feel like.
Right. Right. Well, it's all
Yeah.
gotten, it's not as simple as just like taking good care of the film that it was recorded on. It's
Hmm.
become, films have become non-material things now, and it's kind of hard to track something that's not really material. And it does have
Yeah.
some like hard drives and stuff where those
Totally.
films are stored and things.
Yeah.
Like you can still
Absolutely.
locate stuff like that, but that goes
Sometimes,
bad.
sometimes, I mean, some of those, I mean, Criterion, sometimes like those early Hitchcock films, like Foreign Correspondent or like
Yeah.
fucking 39 Steps, those lesser known Hitchcock films, like they were the ones to do that. Like they were the ones to get the original negative and scan it and make a
Yeah.
digital copy of it.
Yeah.
And so like
I
that's,
think that's so cool. I think
yeah,
that's
it's
so
super
cool.
cool. It's like it's super important.
The other thing I want to talk about, which this is kind of weird, but I heard a really interesting conversation, which was talking about how different movies are and how they impact culture, how we as a culture consume movies with
Uh-huh.
streaming service in this, and having this catalog of just every movie ever, as
Uh-huh.
opposed to
Yeah.
just the couple movies that come out. And these guys, I think it was Corridor Crew that I was listening to that was talking about this. They made the point of how the length of time that a film is relevant in culture
Mm-hmm.
is much,
Oh
much
yeah.
shorter
Oh
than it
yeah.
was. Like you think about a Steven Spielberg film or all those, or
Yeah.
Tarantino film even,
Right.
the impact and the way it would last, it was last a really long time because that's all you got for a while, you know,
Exactly.
until the
Right.
next
Yeah.
movie came out.
Right.
And you might not have like a DVD collection or things like that.
Uh-huh.
But now, like a new release is just like, oh, just, you know, add it to the pile, man. Add it to the pile. So
Right.
instead of like having these significant movies where like, you know, maybe Jaws doesn't hit for some people, but then
Yeah.
like E.T. does, you know, and you have like those
Yeah.
fandoms like that. Now it's the case where we're talking about like it's more based on personal preference, where it's like my preference is based on the whole context of every film ever made throughout the
Uh-huh.
entire history of time, and I
Right.
like these like this range of things,
Yeah.
and that might not look anything close. There might be zero overlap
Mm-hmm.
with like you or the person sitting next
I
to me
mean,
or
I think
whoever
like
it
what
is.
you're saying, basically, I think that's a great point, and I think what you're saying too is that, like, I read that as it's almost harder to, it's gonna be harder for classic films to be even like made because of
Identified.
this so
Yeah.
identified
Yeah.
because there's so much content out
Yeah.
there that, and what's interesting too is that this is like even with like Criterion and South Factory and even companies like A24, as much as I love A24 and I love the movies that they make, there are a lot of people who like A24 for the brand, you know? And those films are more uh going to be, a lot of those films are going to be deemed classics for sure, as years go by, just because of the quality, first of all, in some of those films, and just the already, like a film like Lady Bird, for example, has had, influence that it's had in this short period of time. Um, but what's interesting is that, like, what about like all these other things that aren't attached to a brand, aren't attached to something like A24 or Criterion? Since I love Criterion, there are definitely Criterion fanboys, that will buy a movie just because Criterion uh put 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 it on the collection, which is not a
Right.
bad thing at all. That, because most of those movies are obscure and no one knows about them, so it's cool that these films are getting seen,
Yeah. Yeah.
But what's interesting is, like, are they really the cultivators of, like, I don't know, preserving these films that are going to be influential as the years go by because there's so much content? So really,
Right.
it might be a good thing that these things exist, almost to like wrangle these like modern things together. Because
Yeah.
even Criterion, I'd love to talk to the guy. I would love to like ask. I have so many questions from the people
Yeah, I
who run
know.
that place, but because since I've been collecting Criterions, I don't have a lot, but like since I've been collecting them, it's probably like over 5 years now. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't put out new releases, like, but now they're putting out newer things, which isn't bad at all. Like, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Parasite, Uncut Gems, The Irishman, Roma, like all these films that were pretty recent, like
Yeah.
2 years
Yeah.
ago, are put on Criterion, and I would love to ask like what their philosophy behind that is, because if you look at the back of Criterion, on every Criterion says it has their mission statement, which is basically like, we are preserving, uh we want to put all the basically beloved and like, and um being worthy of value of the cinematic art form on our collection.
Yeah.
And like, I guess it's interesting that they're doing these like newer releases because, like, and things like Netflix, I would love to ask them about, like, because they put a lot of those great, fantastic Netflix movies on Criterion, like The Irishman, Roma, Marriage Story. I would love to know like why they're doing that. Is it because of what we just talked about, where because why put that on, you know, um, Criterion, where most people have Netflix. Most people
Yeah.
could just go and watch the movie. Why
That's a
do
great
this?
question. That's such a
And
good
so
question.
I don't know. Maybe they have that in their mind where we might be creating a collection of what deems classics in the future, or what, because there might be really what we're talking about in classics and stuff is what's inspiring the new artists, what's inspiring the new filmmakers.
Yeah,
And
right.
people like you and me who really want to make films or want to make art at some point, like look at the Criterion Collection as like, almost like what's crazy to me is looking at the Criterion channel, which is their streaming service. This is a fucking film school that you have in front of you. I
Yeah.
mean, you
Yeah.
have a film school. Like, you don't have to fucking just watch all of these and you will learn about the cinematic art form.
Right.
And maybe they have that mind where they are creating this bank of like amazing works of art, like
Yeah, I
cinematic
think I think
art,
they I think they must. It's such a so this point makes me think about how it's significant to identify that with film and with music, it's kind of a weird thing because film and music are entertainment industries. It's about
Mhm.
entertaining people. But on the other side, which sort of is the mission of Criterion or like a studio like A24,
Right,
they're really about crafting and collecting the significant pieces of art in terms of how they affect
right,
human society and humans
right,
development
right,
and the progression of the art form. That's like these,
right.
higher pretentious, if you will,
Totally, 100%.
like more way of thinking about films and
Yeah,
stuff.
right,
And that's kind of an interesting distinction to make
yeah,
because like uh go back to Endgame or Infinity War, that is
yeah,
a classic on an entertainment level.
yeah, right,
It was a
yeah,
classic significant event in term Avatar was a classic significant event in
yeah,
terms of entertainment. But
totally.
and maybe this is just my opinion, but not in the same way that Parasite was
No, of
for
course not.
film or for society.
No, of course not. I mean, I think like I don't think that that's a hot take. I
Yeah.
think that's a pretty like accepted thing. And I love Endgame. I think Endgame was super impressive and amazing. And I saw it a few times. I went like a couple times to see it. Because it was that great and that entertaining of a movie. But yeah, I mean, Parasite is like, it's incredible. I mean, it's an amazingly
Yeah.
made film that is so. Well, those are weird things to compare to because they're both going for so like different things, like
Yeah.
emotion wise, and that's why context is so important. Like of course, like Endgame's not going to be on put on the Criterion Collection. They don't want to.
Yeah.
They're making this is they're making an entertainment film for the masses. Like they're not trying to make like something that is a Van Gogh or they're not doing that, and they know
Yeah.
that they're not doing that.
And
They're
I
not in
think
that business.
and I think the big question when you which gets complicated is that you can that intuitively understanding that is really easy to do, but when you
Mhm.
try to come up for reasons like, well, why can't Endgame be a classic, it's like that's
Yeah, I
really
mean,
a hard thing to answer.
I think people, that's also something that people have like always tried to like with the Academy Awards, for example,
Yeah.
where, um, which a lot of people, which I think the Academy Awards are, but so they just there's a few years, some years ago, analyzing the Oscars is a fascinating thing in the conversation of classics too, because a lot of the Best Picture winners are trash, and people completely forget about them. They are relevant for a time. Sure, there are exceptions clearly. That. Forrest Gump, for example, I think that one Best Picture. I mean, that movie is still
Yeah.
talked about to this day. And is great. Um, but Parasite, winning Best Picture,
Yeah, Lord
that
of the
that will
Rings.
Lord of the Rings, that will definitely be Lord of the Rings already a classic, but like Parasite will most likely, I'm almost like 100% sure that 20 years from now it's going to be known as like a a great Best Picture winner and something that everybody kind of recognizes as fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
Um, which that makes me super happy because that film is, it's so not Oscar bait. It's very bold and it's very, you know, um, it's daring. And that's it's cool to see movies like that get recognized on that level. but even like you know like when I say like there's been how many like 80 best picture winners or something, or 70 or something like that. Like only a handful are even remembered. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of them are
and
just so
even
bad.
worse, the nominees that are nominated for best picture, like a lot of them you don't even remember. You know,
Yeah.
and that's not to say that those films are bad and they're not worthy of seeing. But I'm just saying like there's something to that. Like the idea that the biggest prestige award, you know, supposedly, the cinematic art form is kind of bullshit because a lot of these films no one remembers and doesn't care about them, you know?
Right. Right. It's so true because like the best, if we could put it'd be very possible to say that the best movie that was made in a year might not have been seen by anybody. You know, the best
Yeah,
technical film.
totally.
It's very
Yeah.
possible that no one
That
ever
happens
laid
most of
eyes
the
on it.
time, you know?
Um, yeah, you know, so one of the things that you said that I thought was pretty cool, and it's kind of the significant thing about why classics are relevant, I could say. It's
Hmm.
like we've come around for this, but it's like, why even care? Why even go
Yeah,
about debating this? It's like besides like the human interest of figuring out what's good or what's the best. But what you said about the Criterion channel, I think is really significant, where it's like
yeah,
you could watch that and it is a film school. And that's
yeah,
what's so cool about this collection of classic films. Maybe not all the best movies ever made, but
right.
if you look at those, you will learn the fundamentals of how to effectively tell a story through the film medium.
100%.
That's what's
Yeah,
cool about
yeah,
classic films because you
yeah,
can watch that and learn that just through studying these
right.
fundamental masterpieces,
And
you
there's
know?
so many like things that, you know, classics that like there's like we were saying right before there's classic films that have inspired me super deeply. You know, that like 2001 A Space Odyssey, you know,
Yeah.
blew my fucking mind when I saw it,
Yeah.
you know, it still blows my mind to this day. Um and that's a classic without a doubt, you know, and like Lawrence of Arabia, fucking incredible movie. Um, you know, all those early Spielberg movies are shaped my fucking childhood. Um
Yeah.
and shaped a lot of people's childhood. And not just because it's they're great. That's why is that people watch these films. They wouldn't last. You know, E.T. came out 1982. My mom watched it when she was a kid, and I watched it as a kid. That's a feat. That's
Yeah.
not. That's
Yeah.
not. That's like that's once in a lifetime fucking movie. You know that
Yeah.
just transcends generations like that. Back to the Future, you know, like there
Yeah.
are, you know, one of the most mind-blowing things ever to me when I first got to film school was, you know, I love that. I love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But like, I watched it because my dad was like, when I started getting interested in cinema, he was like, "You know, watch Back to the Future. It's fucking awesome." And because he grew up and he watched it when he was like 15, I watched it when I was like 13 and it changed my fucking life.
Yeah.
Literally, I was like, I love movies and I fucking love skateboarding. And I so like, you know, so like but what was stunning was like going to film school and how many people like agree with me. You know, like how many people our age like loved Back to the Future and like that's just super impressive. Like it's just you know, movies that can you still talk about 40 years later, like it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's
It's
all
really
about time.
insane.
All about time. Like
Yeah.
that's it. You
And
know?
it's a weird thing because at the it's just such a mixed bag because on one hand I really feel that significant the word classic does have a significant type of meaning that is to a degree somewhat objective, but at the
Yeah.
same time I also think that that's total bullshit and like
Yeah.
all films just have to be judged based on your experience with them.
Exactly.
um
Yeah. I mean that's like the interesting thing is like um that I think what people like what we're saying is what people should know and what I have learned is that like I kind of wanted to start pull up classic movies that I've seen and that I just don't like, and just like talk
yeah.
about why I don't like them. And you know, and but I'm not gonna be like there is a type of person that like, and I think these people are morons, but the types of people that are like this is a classic movie and I don't like it, therefore it's not a classic and it shouldn't be talked about
Right,
anymore.
right,
That's
right.
fucking you're egotistical maniac.
Yeah.
Um, and listen, The Matrix, I will tell you, I don't love The Matrix. That's one of the most beloved movies that I like it. I have problems with The Matrix. It's not like one of my favorite things ever. That's one of the most beloved movies of all time. And I would 150% call it a classic without a fucking doubt. I mean, the influence that that movie had is just unbelievable. It's still being felt today. I mean, the
Yeah.
influence that film had is it's just it's unmatched to like action filmmaking. I think in the last 20 years. It's not my favorite thing though. Like it's not like my favorite action movie, and that's fine, you know. Like you're not supposed to like every classic movie, but like I was saying with Bringing Up Baby, that was like an amazing movie for the time. It was like this amazing thing for the time and it influenced a bunch of 60s films, 70s films, 80s films. And then when Harry and Sally came along and then changed the thing again.
Yeah.
And then, so it's just like, I get it. The farther you go from like these classics, the harder it is to get into them, you know, because things change and people change and like we're not into a lot of those early 40s films, the way they treat women is interesting. So
Yeah.
like it's different.
Little unique.
So it's
Little
hard to
unique.
like enjoy some of those films because they're I mean
Yeah. Well,
The Jazz Singer, for example, like that's a classic movie. That's a
yeah.
film that, one of the first films that had sound in it. I remind people there's a character doing blackface in that movie.
Right.
It's super just
Or
racist.
even more extreme, The Birth of the Nation, which is a Ku Klux Klan
Very
propaganda
racist
film,
movie.
which
Yeah,
was like the first film with cross-cutting. We
right.
wouldn't have Lord of the Rings without The Birth of the Nation, which is such a weird and kind of disturbing thing to think about.
I guess it's not that disturbing. Things change, times change, and like that is funny. Like I did forget that that's when cross cutting was invented. It's
Yeah, it was
hilarious.
Birth of a Nation.
Yeah, that's funny as shit.
Yeah,
Um,
I know it's a
so
really
like it makes sense that like my kids are gonna watch Citizen Kane and be like, what the fuck? Like they're gonna be
yeah.
like, what in the hell is this? To really enjoy Citizen Kane, you have to be like a fucking nerd. You gotta
Yeah.
be like us. You gotta be like a cinema nerd
Yeah.
to actually enjoy Citizen
You,
Kane when you're
you know
24.
the the other thing about that, I think that's true to a certain degree, but
Yeah,
I also think it's true that if you think about like all the films that were made in 1940 or all those black and white movies,
yeah,
and a lot of them are someone who hasn't seen a lot of them or uninitiated might kind of push them off or not think about them
totally.
so much. But then you
Yeah,
show them a Hitchcock film, and
right.
more often than not, those people are fucking
Yeah, I
engaged with
mean,
Hitchcock.
there's things that people, I'm not saying all, obviously, all 50 films, all 40 films. I mean, it warmed my heart. When one of my buddies, I told him to watch, his hot films, and he watched Vertigo and loved it. That was great. I mean, Vertigo is a strange movie. It's a weird movie, first of all, but it's even weirder, just because of how it was made, because it's, 54 or whatever that movie came out. Um, and so for him to genuinely enjoy it and have, emotional response and like emotional response to the story, and that's
Yeah,
great. That means that some of these have legs, and
yeah,
definitely like well, I mean, the thing is like classics also can like I don't know, maybe this is I never looked this up, but can something be dethroned as a classic movie, as
yeah,
times go by, like would because like Vertigo is still being watched today and Alfred Hitchcock movies are still loved today, like that's one thing that people I think will there will definitely be classics that will last. As farther than we go, like Citizen Kane will be more and more dated and more and more and more and more dated. So
Yeah.
I think it will be even harder because, like, even now, it's hard for some people to. What is a newspaper? Like, it's like they're like, what's a
Oh,
newspaper?
that's crazy.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
And
that's
so, like,
crazy.
for like 30 years from now, they're gonna be like, what? Like, really? What is a newspaper, Dad?
Yeah.
What the hell is a newspaper?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well, it's
you're not gonna understand movie at all. You're like, what? Like,
that's
you're
what the
not gonna do some
situation,
research to enjoy it.
right. Right. There's that's such an interesting point. It's such an interesting point because to in one hand, I feel like once a movie is in history as a classic, then it will always have like sort of that time capsule history
Absolutely,
placement,
totally, yeah,
and then it's sort of
absolutely.
contained by the
That's
historians who will
true.
sort of report back to you about
Yeah,
that.
that's true.
But to a certain degree, it's going to be forgotten from popular culture, which brings back to Criterion why they're so important because
Right.
they're holding on to that stuff so that because it's really important for the popular culture to be
Yeah.
involved with the new
And,
stuff. We have to generate new classics. That's very
that
important.
also makes me think too, like, I don't know if I made this point, but the idea that Netflix, like, with the content, so much content comes out on Netflix and so much shit comes out on all these streaming services,
Yeah.
like so much shit, like
Yeah.
ungodly amount of shit. I need to
Just,
underline that. It's unbelievable how much movies show, like,
uh,
something like Narrative Story is varied. Like, you're not going to find Narrative Story most likely on the homepage right now,
yeah.
because you have to you have to dig for it. It's
You
still
have to
there,
hunt.
but there's
Yeah.
so much fucking shit that you can't, like, find it. Someone might not find it. So it's good that Criterion is like, hey, remember this? Like
Yeah.
10 years ago, like, hey, this is still great. Like, go watch this.
Right. And that's
Don't
why
buy it on Criterion. Just watch it. Like the fact that we have it on the Criterion collection, just don't watch it. It's on Netflix. You don't have
go
to
watch it
buy
on
it.
Netflix. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing about how we all society might have amnesia to a thing that's like really good or really cool, like vinyls or
Oh,
something, right? Like
yeah.
vinyls had a resurgence
Yeah, I
because
wonder if that's gonna happen
they had like an appeal. So
for
there's certain
Blu-rays.
types of movies that might like come out. Yeah, like with the exact format of Blu-rays will have another heyday or something. I mean, I could see something like that happening.
I
I
think
could see
so.
something like a physical media, like a certain movie just has a
Because I think
cool.
they're even the I think the what's funny is that, like, if you look at the Blu-ray sales, this is so funny, but if you look at the Blu-ray sales, like the overall Blu-ray sales, they're going down. If
Mhm.
you look at Criterion, they're going up.
Wow.
So what's interesting is they're kind of part of the Blu-ray. It's becoming a niche thing. It used to be a big,
Well,
thing, but now with vinyls and Criterions, it's the same audience. You're buying vinyls and buying Criterions. They're profiting on the boutique aspect to
wow.
these things.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's really interesting. That it kind of makes sense though that what we'd
hmm
want on physical, what I want a permanent record of are the good ones, right?
right,
That's kind of
right.
what I want.
I mean, yeah,
So
I
it
don't
makes
have, I don't
sense.
just, these are like some of my favorite albums of all time, but I'm only buying those. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
like,
Well, that's so weird because it used to be that these physical artifacts, CDs,
that's the only
vinyl,
way to get
Blu-rays,
things.
that's how you watched the
Right, right,
movie.
right, right. Yeah,
But
exactly.
now it's like kind of archaic and now it's like a this is like my artifact of my devotion to
Yeah,
this
right.
thing,
Yeah,
this represents this is like my Jesus cross that I
exactly.
have to
Yeah, I
show
mean,
that I actually care.
yeah, and that's what I think. It's just, those statistics made me laugh because it's just like, yeah,
That's
I mean,
wild.
it makes sense. It's just, but I think also same goes with like Arrow Video and Shout Factory Blu-rays and things like that because they specialize in the niche communities, these niche things that love these classic films, classic cinema, classic cult films, and they service that. You could buy Army of Darkness on Blu-ray at Target, or if you really like this movie, you can buy the Shout Factory version that has the two different cuts on it, way more special features, a better restoration of the movie, and that's what people want, who
Yeah.
are into that stuff. Um, and they just get it, these brands, they understand, the market. Um, but I think at the same time, why I like them so much is they're actually doing good things for the cinematic landscape. Is that they're also preserving these classic films or to be classic films.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
2B classics. I
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think I don't know, man. You have anything else to say about this question?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's you can talk about what it means. Since we both majored in films, we can talk about what it means based on our education and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
that can be kind of a definitive answer. But at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, it's really ambiguous, and it's
That's an
just the things.
interpretation, you know.
Yeah, it's really up to interpretation. I think the best way to think about it is kind of what we said at the very beginning, which is
Yeah,
just it's those films that stay relevant for a long period of
right.
time.
Good or bad
Good or
or
bad,
whatever, like it's just
however they do.
how it happens. Um, I guess we'll end it on what is a film that came out? This is gonna be funny. But what is a film that came out in the past 3 years that
Oh
you
shit.
firmly believe, in 20 years that you'll think is a classic movie? Like, 20 years from now, people look back on it and say, that's great.
Yeah, that was the one. That
Yeah.
was the one. Man, dude. You mean that was made
Yeah,
in
that
the
came
last three
out,
years?
that you saw, the past like 3 years that you know, just think it has that special quality or whatever reasoning you have that like become a classic.
Yeah, I mean, The Lighthouse is the one that first comes to mind. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that's in the 3 year range. Lighthouse and
Why
Mad
would
Max
you
Fury
say that?
Road. Why would I say The Lighthouse?
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I think I agree with you
It's a good fucking
on some
question.
hand, but do you just say that because it's great, or is there like a greater thing that you think?
In my opinion, I would also consider The Green Knight to be one of those films that might
Oh,
stick
interesting. Yeah,
around for a long time. Both of those films, the argument could be made that they're just up my alley.
yeah,
I think that there's a very strong argument, maybe an
right.
equally strong argument. But for something like The Lighthouse or Green Knight, those films are made in a way that's engaging with the art form of cinema
Mm-hmm.
in a way that other films only dream of reaching, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. Like
Yeah,
the capacity and level that The Lighthouse functions as a
right.
films is like in like this world beyond most films that I
Mm-hmm.
have ever seen and can
Well,
only be.
I think to add to that, I think obviously there's lots of films that are able to tell stories with the cinematic art form that are great that come out every single year. But I think what you're getting at with The Lighthouse is that just the nature of the story, not even just like the cinematic, like the visual elements of it, it's ridiculously deep. Like
Yeah,
it's one of those like if you want to analyze it until you die. Like
yeah,
it's one of
yeah,
those perfectly executed visions and these like perfectly constructed characters that I have read so many interesting theories about the lighthouse. In theory, I hate what the film is about, like what it means to them. Like when they watch it,
yeah,
like what do they get out of it? And there's so many different interpretations of it. Not only just interpretations of it, well thought out interpretations that make sense and
yeah.
like are connected to the things in the film. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just the way that Robert Eggers crafted that movie. I think is unbelievably dense. Like it could go on for decades.
Yeah.
But that type of movie could also someone to watch it like my buddy couple buddies from home watched it and said, "What the fuck is this?" and then completely never thought about it again.
Right, right, right,
But
right.
but um, I think that film will become a cult classic, hands down. Not even a question.
Right.
Like hand on God, there's gonna be you know
A
a
community.
huge audience for that film.
Right. And
Especially
And
people
this
our age that are in the cinema and stuff like that.
it's not the type of thing that's going to be the last in the way that we talk about Back to the Future or a Steven
No,
Spielberg film is
no.
lasting as being like your kids watch it or like it's
Yeah,
passed down generation through
right.
generation. It's like it's this thing that I think people will continuously find throughout the years and
Well,
be
it's
like,
also like
whoa.
I think also like we were getting at too, like the wholly unique thing is that it's wholly original. Like there's never been a movie like that. Like there's never
Yeah.
like not just in like what it looks like and the cinematic element, the story of it. Like just the
Yeah.
idea of like two like I've never even heard of a movie like that. Like
Yeah.
I think there's like maybe like one or two that are similar to the the story of it, but there's nothing like that
Right.
story. So even like just if you've never seen a frame of the movie and just read the synopsis, it's already like, well, I want to see that. That sounds fucking fascinating, you
Right.
know.
Right. And I think
And I
it's
think
also
that's
going to
gonna
be.
grab people, you know.
And I think the other thing that it will have an influence on is maybe not the people who are just consumers of films, people who just like to watch films,
Hmm.
but on the makers of films, because I think that's going to be one of those films
Yeah.
that will be like, I watched The Lighthouse and I wanted to make this movie.
Well,
And I
what
think you'll see
also
shit like that a
I think
lot.
what also is gonna make that film classic is Robert Eggers. Robert Eggers is an incredible
Right.
filmmaker, and I think
He's
as
an
the years
early
yeah,
genius. I'm betting
well, I
all my
think
money
as
that
the
he's a
years go
genius.
by, like, because that's only his second film, and I think as years go by, people are going to find that film, and people are going to, even if it's The Northman looks absolutely amazing, and it most likely will be his most successful movie. I
Yeah.
already kind of feel that because it's bigger budget, it's not produced by A24, it's like a it's like Focus, and it's
Oh,
a
interesting.
bigger
Oh, that's
budget film,
exciting.
and so it's gonna be bigger stars, also Skarsgård and like things like that. They're definitely pushing for a bigger. And that when that
Right.
trailer came out, it made a splash. You know, people were talking about it. Like more than like outside of my film loving circle, it got out of there. You know, like dad saw fucking
Yeah, yeah.
trailers. Like, whoa,
Which
that was
and
fucking awesome.
that's really
You know?
interesting too, because in talking about history, that's another way that films might become classics after their initial release,
Oh,
is that the
totally.
director.
That's happened so many times.
Well,
You know,
actually, Hitchcock is kind of like that. Hitchcock
Hitchcock,
got so
absolutely.
famous, he made
Right.
a couple like North by Northwest and Psycho, just
I
super
remember
crazy
wasn't
influential.
I remember Vertigo. I remember reading wasn't Vertigo kind of like not that well received when it
I
first
don't
came
think it
out?
was. I think it was kind of
Yeah.
like one of those myth movies that
Hmm.
like people like Martin Scorsese when they were young were like
Right.
hunting to find Vertigo,
Yeah.
the
Right.
the
Right.
the Hitchcock film that was mysterious and weird.
Right. I
But
mean, there's a lot of Hitchcock films that I love that are like Stranger on a Train. I think is one of his best movies, and like that's not really
yeah,
talked about that as much. But yeah, like that's how I got Scorsese a lot. You know, After Hours has had a major, like just reliable. You know, over the past few years. You know, the first of all, The Weekend maybe his hugely successful album after that movie. You know, based on that movie, not just naming it that, but the aesthetic of the videos and stuff like that, heavily inspired by that film. And so I think that film has just had like a big revival, you
yeah.
know. Um,
That's another interesting thing too about in the context of revival and films being significant in identifying classics is because what the majority of people will see, which the majority, unfortunately, whatever way you see it, is probably going to be the most defining factor of what determines the significance of a film, because
yeah,
there's the people who are watching it, which will give you the volume of people who have seen it, and then also the cultural impact, because the more people who watch it, the more it's going to impact people one way or
right,
another.
exactly.
um but then for something like films that might get like retroactively put onto a streaming service, then it
Yeah,
has like a second life or a second chance at
totally.
becoming like a classic again, you
And
know.
that's happened a lot too, where sleeper hits, where people like Napoleon Dynamite, for example, that was a big cult following. That's a
Hmm.
big cult movie that, I mean, has inspired, like, that's one of the movies that has shaped my sense of humor. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
honest to God. Napoleon Dynamite, Hot Rod, these films that bombed. They bombed so hard. No one saw them. Like,
Yeah.
and they just, but the right people, like the people that they were ultimately made for, they saw them and
Yeah.
uh, created them to be iconic and classic status that they are today, you know. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's fascinating. I love like that discussion because it's just like a cool gambling game, or it's like a guessing game where it's like this movie's great because it have the legs, you know, to
Yeah. Yeah.
sustain, you know, because like there's so many, like I saw Nightmare Alley, incredible movie, but I don't think that that's gonna be like, you know, a classic, you know,
Right. Just a good
but
movie.
it's a great movie, yeah. And so, but like for me, I think one of the reasons why I even like I watched Uncut Gems again, and that film, you know, has quickly become like I'm obsessed with that movie. I mean, I was obsessed with it when I saw it the first time, but as the years go by, I just get more and more enamored with the making of that film. The I love that film. But I rewatched it and I just was watching it. I was like, this just has this classic film quality about it. And I
Yeah.
think it's because one, it's great. It's a beautiful execution of what they're going, this intense thriller that they're making. But there's this originality, you know, in it where like it's a film that's never really been made before, like about jewelers in the diamond district. It's a period piece, so it's not tied to a specific, you know, it's not tied to a modern. It's set in 2012. It's already dated when we're watching it now, but
Yeah.
because of that, it has this already this timeless quality about it, because it's set in a specific time. Um, and I don't know. And also with the Safdie brothers too is that it's pretty much known that they're gonna go and make more great shit. And so I just think that that film, the more films that they make, it's just gonna be kind of poke out, being like, this is, you know, this is when they really started, or you know, whatever. I just think that film just has this. I don't know. There's just this mystic quality about it that I just think is just gonna, even if people, first of all, it's pretty successful, but even if people like weren't initially like wowed by it, like when they first saw it, I'm almost certain that that movie's gonna have a revival or a legs, you know, again when Adam Sandler, you know, does another drama or does, you know, or like dies or something, you know, like
Yeah.
it's gonna be rediscovered, you know. I just think it's gonna last forever. But
Yeah, it's funny because I agree. The the thing that we're trying to describe is sort of this mystic, intuitive feeling that you have when you watch certain types of films. Either
yeah,
if it's the films in history that you were told this is a classic, enjoy, and
yeah.
then like the new films that feel like, oh, this has that feeling again.
Right.
And
Because
at the
that's indescribable. Like you can't like that's what's so crazy about calling something that just came out a classic, because it's
yeah,
like, how do you know? Like you don't know that. Like that's something that comes across over time, you know. You can really
yeah,
like it, but
yeah, yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, what really makes a film a classic, we look at a large scale level, it's kind of hard to talk about in big objective terminology
Yeah.
on for all of humanity. It's really hard to speak on that. But what is happening when something is a classic is that one person sees it, they're like, that was dope. And they go and say, hey Jim, I saw this. It
Exactly.
was dope.
Right,
And the other
right.
person goes in and is like, huh, that was
Yeah,
dope. And then
yeah,
they go and do the same,
right,
rinse and repeat. And it's
right.
just that's
And
what
it's
happens.
just all about how long that lasts,
How
you
long
know.
does that last? How
Yeah,
long does
like
that
does it
last?
last a year or
Yeah.
does it last all of eternity? You
And
know,
is the maybe the movie doesn't happen in theater, but Criterion saves it, and then some guy
exactly
gets
right,
that movie, and then if
right.
that's available, then there you go. It
Like
happens
I mean,
again.
yeah, like movies that just bomb and then become classics. You know, The Shining was, you know,
Another
no
famous
one saw it,
example.
everybody hated it, it was critically panned, no one got it. But now it's just, it's like when I found that out, my brain exploded
I
because it
know
was
it's
like this
so
is one of the
insane.
most classic things I've ever seen, like up until that point. I had heard so many things about that film, you know, so many iconic scenes and lines that were spoke to me when I was like 10, Here's
Yeah.
Johnny, and shit like that. You know, like when I finally saw it, I was like, oh, that was amazing. I love that. But when I found out that no one liked it when it came out, and like it bombed, and like no one's like, what? Like that's crazy.
You know,
How does that happen?
that's another interesting thing where it's like I'm not sure if stuff like that is going to happen as often anymore
I don't think so either.
because now we have back
You mean
then the
like people that
situation.
like rediscovering things like that?
Yeah, well, because with something like The Shining or The Thing or something, they had to go through like mainstream outlets and they had to like
Hmm.
face that trial, which obviously they're going to fail if it's kind of a weird movie, you know,
Yeah,
unless
right.
it changes or is innovative enough and like a Tarantino thing, which is like
Yeah,
cool enough in a weird way. Like then it's going to sink and fail. But now, like with the way things are released, and the internet moves so fast that all movies kind of instantly find their niche almost. It like takes a very short time for them to
yeah.
find their niche. So they might be dismissed by a certain category, but
Uh-huh.
then they'll find. So I'm not sure if there's ever going to be like a period of it being like largely and loudly dismissed and then returned. It's going to be more like not appreciated mainstream, but it found its niche. Like
Yeah.
you just
Yeah, it's I
see
think
that
it's just
happen.
easier it's easier to find like for films like that. I think you're right. Because it's streaming and stuff and marketing,
Right.
like social media marketing, like on Netflix, oh my God, I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but the Texas Chainsaw remake looks so fucking bad. Oh my God, it looks so bad. I can't wait to watch it. But it looks so bad. Dude, that line, you saw the trailer, right?
No, I haven't seen the
Oh
trailer.
my
I should watch
God,
it.
dude, you gotta
You
watch
sent it
it.
to me. I don't know why
Oh
I didn't
fuck,
watch
you
it.
gotta watch. There's a scene where oh God, I couldn't even. So they're like in like a van, and Leatherface comes in there, and one of them has a phone, and he starts filming Leatherface, and he goes, "You're gonna get canceled, bro!" Like he says that. Um, it's unbelievable. Um, but like a movie like that, they understand, like Netflix understands the marketing, so they're gonna market it towards, when you, that's what it's all about the algorithm, baby. Like, I watch a lot of horror movies on Netflix. Like, when that movie comes out, when I open Netflix, it's gonna be the first thing that it recommends me. You
Right.
know, it's gonna be like, hey, check this out, and that's cool. That's cool in the regard of like it can show people who like if you're Netflix, if you like watching like Oscar winning film, for example, it will when it gets an Oscar film on there, it will show you.
Yeah.
So
Then to going back to Videodrome, it also kind of feels like
hmm,
mind control.
it is, yeah, absolutely,
I mean,
yeah, it
it
is,
is basically manipulation.
yeah,
It's 100% manipulation. It's
totally,
not
and
basically,
that's
it's
why
what
Video
the
Drone is
algorithm
crazy.
is. Yeah.
So the thing about this podcast, go watch Video Drone.
Yeah.
It'll
Check out
fucking creep you out, but it is fucking creepy and eerie how well, I don't know, just how predictive it was,
I think that's what I would say too at the end of this is
Go watch Video Show. Bye
yeah,
bye.
yeah, you can watch
Oh,
everyone. I feel like you can find the classics pretty easily, and yeah, you should
totally.
watch that. But like our recommendation, check out the cult classics because those are some
Yeah.
really cool films.
Yeah. They're really cool films, but I think it's also with cult classics. You gotta be in the weird shit. You're not in the weird. Like if you like, your
Be
film pretty
prepared.
vanilla. Like
Yeah,
I would never recommend like Videodrome to like my buddy Dom, for example. Like I know that he would just be he would just scared as fuck. It
yeah,
would
yeah.
freak him out and be like, "What the fuck? My life has changed."
What have you done to me? Yeah,
And but like if you like those genre movies and cult movies, yeah, go fucking. Because cult movies are interesting because like there's inherently something interesting about them just in the phrasing because it's something that not everybody grabbing onto, meaning like there's something weird about it and didn't, you know,
good point.
click with everybody. So, and what really clicked with a small portion of people. So there's just inherently something weird going on with it. So just check it out because you'll see something different and weird, most likely.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
watch
yeah,
something like Society, this is a completely fucked up,
yeah.
bizarre. Roger Corman, I think that Roger Corman produced that. It was a
Yeah, I'm
big,
not. Not
horror
100% sure.
movie producer, produced all those like a lot of big horror movies. But yeah, I mean, I think was a good discussion.
This was a
I think
great
we
discussion.
I think
Super
we
fascinating.
really got to the bottom of it. Just I think
We,
we found the answer,
we found it out. There is no answer.
and we shared the answer with everybody.
Yeah.
There is no answer.
Yeah, that's super fun. That was super cool.
All right, everybody. We will catch you in the next one. We don't know what the next one will be.
But
But
we'll be there.
we'll be there. We'll definitely be there. All right, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.
Perfect.
That was a great discussion. We should do more of those. Those are great.
Yeah. Well, ah.